This is a further elucidation of Amjad Rafiq's attempts to obfuscate the catastrophic statement he made regarding Sulaymaan and attributing to this noble prophet that he taught magic. In the previous recording, I highlighted how the clause and phraseology that he used was unequivocal, in that he stated on top of the magic they learned from Sulaymaan, they also, so a secondary aspect was added to what they had supposedly learned from this noble prophet according to Amjad. And I will highlight other aspects of his lecture and his subsequent explanation, which actually goes against what he's trying to do in distancing himself from that calamitous statement. And he says later on in his speech, quote, "And they would write books, the jinn would actually write books in the time of Sulaymaan. And in these books, they would show the people how to do certain things." He continues, "And they would write these books, and they would put these books underneath the throne of Sulaymaan. They hid them." And some other narrations, they say that Sulaymaan, when he saw the jinn writing these books, he took the books from the people and he put them under the throne. So there's different narrations. Amjad then explains that Iblis came in the form of a man and delivered a sermon to the people. And just before he goes into details about the sermon, he explains how the jinn can come in the form of a man and cause misguidance and confusion to mankind. And in returning to the sermon, Amjad then says that Iblis told the people that Sulaymaan was not a prophet, but rather a magician, and that through his magic he was using, that he subdued jinn, the wind, and other creatures. So there's some key words here, because Amjad says here, attributing this to the statement of Iblis in the form of the man delivering the sermon, and through his magic he was using. Note here, not teaching. So he refers to this Israeliyat narration accurately, in which no attribution was made of Sulaymaan teaching, but rather he states through his magic he was using. Through this magic he was using. He subdued jinn. He also highlighted that through his magic he would control the people. The key word here being control, again, not teach, as he had mentioned earlier on. Amjad then explains that two groups emerged from this sermon. The first group were believers who knew that magic was forbidden and that it was shirk. So they said and accused Sulaymaan of falling into something evil and accused him of being a disbeliever. The second group still asserted that Sulaymaan was a prophet and that he did actually practice magic according to what they were led to believe from Iblis in the form of a man. So they concluded from this that magic was permissible because Sulaymaan was a prophet and he practiced magic. Now, we have to look at these key words of Amjad when he narrates these later aspects, because he refers to the second group understanding that Sulaymaan was a prophet and that he practiced, these are Amjad's words from the narration, he practiced, not taught, magic. The first group held that Sulaymaan knew magic, it was forbidden, and that he fell into something evil. But they did not attribute to Sulaymaan in the narration from Amjad that he taught magic. So Amjad is talking about context. And if you want to widen the context of his speech by going further along in his lecture and listening to this section of the speech, it goes against him. It goes against what he said earlier in the speech, and it goes against what he's trying to explain now. Because he clearly showed that these two groups did not attribute to Sulaymaan the teaching of magic. They did not learn magic from Sulaymaan. Iblis, in the form of a man, according to the narration, Israeliyat, the narration from Amjad Rafiq, came and said that Sulaymaan used magic. So the speech of Amjad earlier on top of what they learned from Sulaymaan, is not connected to any narration that he's bringing before or afterwards. Those words were used by Amjad in his own explanation. Again, it's unequivocally his explanation. He cannot attach it to a narration. He cannot attribute it to the speech of anybody else. So it's for the viewer and those who have heard that lecture and those who are reading his PDF explanation to try and distance himself from speech he said himself, to determine the facts. Even Iblis, and I'm reiterating now, in the form of a man, did not attribute the teaching of magic to Prophet Sulaymaan alayhi salam, but instead that he used magic, and he used it to control the people as well as subduing jinn, wind, and other creatures. So now, those are the narrations that he refers to in his PDF explanation and can be heard in the recording of the speech that he delivered at that time. Let's refer to the earlier part, the key aspect and focus of contention with him. The words he uses on top of the magic they learned from Sulaymaan, they also, and I've explained that in the first audio, those words are not a quote from any narration. They are not within the context of any narration that he is citing. These are Amjad Rafiq's own words, which are in stark contrast to what he narrates later on. And it cannot be understood in any other context because it's unequivocal in its statement as a clause. Even in the written document, we see that he has added a comma just before that particular statement. And that in actuality highlights the erroneous statement even more because it separates it. It was separated anyway. If you listen to the audio, he pauses and then says on top of the magic they learned from Sulaymaan. But even when reading the supposed transcription and trying to add or remove diacritical marks, punctuation marks and whatever, in adding a comma before that statement, it actually isolates the statement even further. The comma causes a pause before he states on top of the magic they learned from Sulaymaan.
Conquered the Jews, he took them back to Babylon, and when the Jews were in Babylon, on top of the magic they learned from Sulaymaan, they also learned the magic in Babylon which the angels came with.
So while I'm repeating myself, it's important to do this to highlight to the listener this error. And instead of labouring the point, all that Amjad needs to do is acknowledge this mistake, apologise for it, it was public, and make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Amjad Rafiq is a prolific writer, is known for that. And like all writers, mistakes are going to be made. But it's from the door of humility to acknowledge when mistakes are made, rectify those, and then move on. And anyone who then wants to rejoice and hold this against him once he's done that, they need to check themselves, because that's problematic in itself. This is not a point scoring game, unfortunately. It has become that, but this is a serious error that was made, and Amjad would do well to acknowledge that error in what has been explained in the first recording, where I highlight and focus on the clause that he uses in particular on top of the magic they learned from Sulaymaan. They also, this is inescapable. However, this second recording should further elucidate and confirm that even Amjad's own context of speech and subsequent written explanation go against everything he's trying to claim in distancing himself from what was a very erroneous mistake that should be rectified, no matter how many years later down the line it is. And repent, apologize, and withdraw his repeated defenses and attempted clarifications of what he actually said, because it only makes things worse for him when you look at the whole context of the speech and what I've just highlighted here. And Allah knows best.